What's going on, everyone? My name's Tenebris Infinite, and since the Dark Skies update, you might have wondered to yourself, what's the best bike in the game now? And today, I aim to answer that question. I've gone about and devised 4 tests to see which is the best bike waifu of the bunch. We'll be comparing the Nomad, Lodver, Vectaire, and Motstand today, and things like their technical handling in urban environments, their fuel economy over long hauls, their ability to land when going off of heights, and lastly, their ability to handle complicated Swedish terrain. So, let's get into it. The first test here is actually a really fun one, and if you watch the route and want to kind of challenge yourself a little bit with the dirt bikes, this is a great route to just take and drive through the streets of Ostervik. But this route kind of takes you down a rather complicated course where you're going off a jump and having to land that jump and then not crash afterwards. Then you have to take a sharp turn, then you have to take an S-turn, and then afterwards you've got another sharp turn with a bump in the road which could mess things up, another S-turn, and then after that you've got to go through a rather tight gap before reaching the finish line. So it's a really fun and, again, kind of complicated urban route. And the Nomad actually handles it really, really well. One of the things that I really enjoy about the Nomad, outside of the fact that it's the base game vehicle that's free, is the fact that it's actually really respectable when you hold it up to the DLC ones. Like, say for instance, the Loader. Its handling is really, really good, but its acceleration is so high on this, like, typical dirt bike that you can sometimes wind up careening into objects without meaning to because you're accelerating so quickly. It does wind up completing the course faster than the Nomad, but it's definitely not safer. Though luckily enough, if you ever do need repair kits, I've put out a video today on how to farm those repair kits, so you can check that out linked at the end of this video if you'd like to. Next up, we have my personal favorite, the Vectaire. This actual motorcycle handles urban environments like a dream, man. It's got pretty much the perfect acceleration and handling to take like all of the things that you're going to be thrown when it comes to urban environments, like tight corners, being able to land jumps, being able to, you know, quickly maneuver around things like S-turns and sharp turns. It's honestly one of my favorite bikes, not just because it goes the fastest, but also because it handles incredibly well. And for the last bike, the Motstand, or as I like to call it, the machine bike. This one is kind of the odd one out of the bunch, as it's built more like a combat bike than anything, even though, as of right now, dirt bikes are a fully non-combat type item in the game. So it kind of sits in this weird realm where it's not entirely designed for its, like, just pure driving potential, and you'll see that as we go through these tests here. The Nomad handles, I guess, fittingly kind of chunky. It has a very kind of almost square turn radius to it, as opposed to the much smoother turn radiuses of the other bikes. It still gets through urban courses, but it's just maybe not the most optimal choice for them. Alright, so next up we're going to be testing out the fuel economy, and I figured what better of a test than to take the 10-mile bike ride, my famous bike ride from way back when I made my best start video for Generation Zero. So driving along this route all the way up to Littorp from Nyhamnen, it's a heck of a drive, but in the end it's really interesting the results that came out of this one. Now, very interestingly, the Nomad lives up to its name and is able to make the entire 10-mile bike ride. Crazy. It is considerably slower than the other vehicles at making this bike ride, but in the end, you're going to see that it's not always about speed. Interesting small aside that you want to avoid if you're driving along this road on the dirt bike, the ticks on the colored lights, they will destroy your bike completely. But we can see here that the dirt bike makes it just a little bit past Sundgard. But for comparison to the Nomad, it made probably what, like 2/3 of the journey and about half the time. Next up, we had the Vactaire, and this actually shows the Vactaire's biggest weak point, which is it is just a gas-guzzling machine, dude. Sure, it makes it there faster than any of the vehicles, but that fuel economy is just really, really rough. So when you're using the Vactaire, you either want to carry a lot of fuel with you, or you want to just use it for very short drives between point A and point B. And then lastly, the Mustang. The machine bike, again, sits in this kind of weird realm. It almost has the same fuel economy as the Nomad, but it falls just a little bit shorter, and even though it does go like about 11, maybe 10 kilometers faster, its fuel economy still winds up being probably, I don't know, 15% worse or something like that. So in the end, it winds up being just not quite as good of an option as the Nomad when it comes to long distance drives. Okay, so with fuel economy out of the way, now we get to do probably one of the most fun tests of the whole bunch. We're just gonna take these things off a whole bunch of jumps over here at Torsberga Fort. So we've got a number of varying heights of jumps that we can test the bike from to see if any of them happen to knock us off the bike itself. Starting off with the Nomad as always, and Red Bike, Best Bike. Come on, you guys agree with me, right? But either way, it takes the off-road jump quite well. Now we're going to take the next jump, which is just a small hop, and then after that, we've got the big jump. The Nomad's handling is one of the worst of the bunch, and I think that handling is somehow related to how your character, lands on the bike. Because for the polar opposite example, let's take a look at the dirt bike, which takes all of these jumps like an absolute champ. This is what the dirt bike was pretty much designed for in the game, was like driving around off-road, going off jumps and stuff like that, and you can very much tell when you're driving around on it. And then we've got my favorite, the Vactaire, and you know what? Surprisingly, the Vactaire, because it's got good handling, does wind up taking all of these jumps very, very well. It's not quite as good as the dirt bike. The dirt bike is like you could jump off a cliff and land on that thing and still be okay. But with the Vactaire, you can still take these jumps and be a-okay. I maybe at some point should try and do a maximum height jump test video. I don't know. Let me know if you'd like to see something like that. And then lastly, the machine bike. With the worst handling of all of the bikes, just look at how this one turns out. So we managed to pull off the off-road jump, but pretty much everything after that is a disaster. Come on, man, it's such a small jump. What are you doing, dude? And then, I feel like this is the physical embodiment of what your parents feel like when they find out you like anime. And for the final test of the day, the downhill off-road ride. It's pretty much any bike's game at this point. So, we're starting off with the Nomad, and the poor Nomad, it really, really struggles off-road. You can see that we're struggling to maintain 30 kilometers an hour, and this is at a 90-degree angle. The moment we even lightly touch a tree, we are sent ragdolling, dude. Now, nicely enough though, for the Nomad, once we start hitting some kind of less rough roads, we actually managed to get up to around 48 kilometers, which is pretty decent. So, the Nomad, it definitely has its intended purposes. And riding around downhill off-road through a Swedish forest isn't one of them. But to its benefit, as long as you're careful while you're driving, you should be able to make it down a hill mostly unscathed. Next up, the dirt bike. And again, if this thing had a destiny, this would be it. It feels really good to rip around through a forest on the loader here. And again, its handling is so dang good that you could just bump off of trees, you could take any sort of a jump, and your acceleration is so good that you can zip through these forests. It's actually it's a little tense, but once you start getting really used to it, you can fly through these forests, man. I almost kind of hope that at some point in the future, the devs will make like a mission where we have to go through a really thick forest downhill on a dirt bike. I guess the only problem is that they're a DLC item. But moving on here, the second last bike of the day, the Vectair. Now, the Vectair suffers from the same thing as the Nomad, where it really does not handle well off-road, especially in rough conditions. But to its benefit, it's got much higher handling, so you're able to take jumps and falls, as well as bumping into the odd tree, but you have to really watch how fast you're going. But you guys can kind of see what I'm saying about how there's like a bar for handling that once you pass that point, it makes off-road driving just significantly much smoother, and luckily enough, the Vectair passes that point. We even almost hit 60 there. Nice! But you can see here that, again, you have to really kind of measure your speedometer while you're going downhill on the Vectair, because if you're past, I think, 20 kilometers an hour, it seems, then you'll wind up crashing. But a pro tip, if you're ever stuck in ragdoll, or if you're riding on your bike and you take a lot of damage, you can always inventory heal to kind of save yourself in a scenario. And finally, the machine bike. The one scenario where you really want to wear a helmet. Dang, randomly generating saplings though, what the heck, man. But either way, ripping around off-road on the machine bike, it's, again, just like the Nomad, it's not what it was built for, so you're gonna have a bad time. I mean, even watching this back feels haphazard. But, again, you know, if there's a will, there's a way, and the one benefit to the machine bike is that it's got a huge health pool, so you could just huck sauce this bike over the edge and then run after it. You just gotta be careful that you don't sauce yourself in the process.
That's a lot of damage. How about a little more?
Because you will absolutely die in the process. Though, I mean, come on. A sick wheelie? Wheelies on dirt bikes, one death. Okay, so one death later, and we made it to the bottom of the hill. So, from our 4 bikes, I think there's a very clear best bike here. Though, that doesn't mean the other bikes are bad. Except maybe the machine bike. The Nomad. It's free, it's reliable, it freaking goes the mile too. With the best fuel economy of all the bikes, it's the best decision when driving far distances. Sure, the lower top speed might make you take a little bit longer, but you'll get to where you need to go without needing a refuel along the way. You can't go wrong with cheap gas. Then the Loadver. This bike is unbiasedly the best decision for a bike, with a respectable top speed, fine fuel economy, but the ultimate off-road capabilities and handling makes this bike stand above the rest as the smoothest feeling ride. Though it's a fragile bike, repair kits are easily gathered from crafting or farming to keep it in top shape as you rip through the Swedish plains and forests that cover the map. Next up, my personal favorite, the Vectair. The fastest bike in terms of raw power, excellent handling, and a respectable health pool. The only kicker is that this thing slurps through fuel like no tomorrow, and it doesn't have that extreme off-road capability that the Loadver has, which I think is okay. Its purpose is exactly what it's made for, ripping through the streets feeling like the coolest kid in Ostatory. And lastly, the machine bike. The odd one out, as it's built for a purpose that isn't quite there in the game. Though the leg shield can save you head-on, the bike's lack of performance and all the basic driving factors make it a worse option overall. Sure, it's got good fuel economy, but it doesn't make up for the chunky ride. I think at least this bike's got style points to it, and extra ones for creativity. It also makes sense that a bike you slapped a ton of machine armor onto would handle worse than the other lighter options. So, do you agree with me that the Loadver is the best dirt bike waifu in the game? Do you still prefer another bike like me? Let me know in the comments down below. I think these dirt bikes were totally worth the wait and are a great addition to the game, offering fun ways to get across the open world of Ostertorn, either with style or substance. Links for the DLC will be in the description below if you haven't picked this one up yet. But for now, thank you for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, peace.